He was a cold millionaire with a heart of ice and a lonely son. She was a humble nanny, desperate for work. Lee Jin-woo distrusted everyone, and Kim Min-ji was no exception. That's why he installed secret cameras in every corner of the mansion, hoping to catch the new nanny red-handed. But what he saw in the recordings was not what he expected. It was something that shocked him to his core, revealing a cruel truth about his own home and an act of courage that would change everything. Prepare for a Korean drama where the truth comes to light and love blossoms where least expected. The monitor screen flickered, casting a cold light on Lee Jin-woo's face. Night advanced, but sleep seemed a distant memory. He was there, in his impeccable office. The heart of ice he thought was unshakable, now under a silent attack. The cameras installed with the intention of unmasking an imposter were revealing a much more complex and painful truth. The first image that hit him was that of his son, Ji-hoon, sitting alone in the vast playroom, his small shoulders hunched over an unfinished puzzle. Ji-hoon, always so quiet, so absent. Jin-woo had always attributed this loneliness to his own lack of time, to the complexity of his life. But what unfolded next shattered that convenient narrative. The door opened, and Park Seo-yeon, his wife, Ji-hoon's stepmother, entered. Her steps were light, but her presence filled the room with a palpable coldness. She didn't stoop to speak to the boy, nor did she offer a smile. Instead, her eyes swept the room with an expression of disdain before landing on Ji-hoon. "Ji-hoon, still with that? Isn't it time to get ready for dinner? Your father doesn't like delays." Her voice was polished, but there was a sharp edge Jin-woo had never noticed before. Ji-hoon flinched slightly, his small fingers hesitating over the puzzle pieces. It was then that Kim Min-ji entered the scene, almost like a silent shadow. She didn't immediately interfere, but her eyes, even through the camera lens, seemed to catch every nuance of the interaction. Seo-yeon, irritated by Ji-hoon's slowness, reached out and with an abrupt movement knocked some puzzle pieces to the floor. "Hurry up, Ji-hoon. Don't make me lose my patience," she said, her voice a little louder, a tone that made the boy recoil. Jin-woo's heart tightened. He had never seen Seo-yeon act like this. In front of him, she was the perfect wife, the attentive stepmother. But the camera lens didn't lie, and then Min-ji acted. "Excuse me, Mrs. Park." Her voice was soft, but carried a surprising firmness. "Ji-hoon was almost finished. I can help him pick up the pieces and get him ready for dinner." "Don't worry." Seo-yeon turned, an elegantly arched eyebrow. "That's not necessary, Nanny Kim. He needs to learn to be faster." Min-ji didn't back down. Her eyes met Seo-yeon's with a calm that bordered on audacity. "It's important for him to finish what he started, ma'am. Persistence is a virtue, and he's just a child." She then knelt beside Ji-hoon, ignoring the stepmother, and began to help the boy pick up the pieces, her movements gentle and encouraging. Ji-hoon, who seemed to be on the verge of tears, looked at Min-ji with silent gratitude, a small smile beginning to form on his lips. Seo-yeon scoffed, an almost inaudible sound, and left the room, her irritation evident in her tense shoulders. Jin-woo felt a chill down his spine. The scene replayed in his mind. Seo-yeon's coldness, Ji-hoon's fear, and Min-ji's courageous and compassionate intervention. He rewound the recording, watching it again, looking for any sign of manipulation, of staging. But there was none. The spontaneity of Min-ji's gesture, the genuine concern in her eyes, was undeniable. He fast-forwarded to the next day. Another scene. Ji-hoon was drawing in the garden, and Seo-yeon was scolding him for getting his hands dirty with paint, even though it was washable paint. She was about to take his notebook and pencils from him when Min-ji appeared. "Mrs. Park, excuse me. Dr. Kim recommended that Ji-hoon spend more time outdoors, exploring his creativity. It's good for his motor and emotional development," Min-ji explained, her voice respectful, but with a subtle authority. Seo Yon hesitated, clearly annoyed at having her plans interrupted. But he's making a mess. What if Mr. Lee arrives and sees this mess? I guarantee everything will be spotless before Mr. Lee arrives. And Ji-hoon will be happy, Minji replied, a small smile on her face as she handed Ji-hoon a wet wipe to clean his hands. Jin-woo watched, dumbfounded. He had hired Minji to take care of Ji-hoon, yes, but he expected her to be just another employee, following orders. Instead, she was acting as a true protector, a wall between his son and the coldness of his own wife. The image of his son, whom he had always seen as distant and somewhat melancholic, now took on a new outline. It wasn't melancholy, it was fear. It wasn't distance, it was isolation. And the woman he had sworn to love, the woman he had chosen to be his son's mother, was behind it all. A wave of guilt and shame hit him. He, the astute millionaire, the ruthless businessman, had been blind in his own home. He had distrusted the poor, humble nanny, while the real threat was hidden in plain sight under the veil of perfection. The tension in his chest grew with each passing second. The recordings continued, revealing a disturbing pattern. Seo Yon, always with a forced smile in front of him, but with a cutting coldness when he wasn't around. And Minji, always present, always vigilant, always defending Ji-hoon with a silent courage that defied her position. Jinwoo felt the ice in his heart begin to crack. It wasn't just shock. It was a revelation that threatened to dismantle the very foundation of his life. The truth was cruel, and he was just beginning to see it. And the woman he had judged, Nanny Kim Minji, was proving to be the only light in the darkness that enveloped his son. What else would those cameras reveal, and what would he do with this overwhelming truth? The night was still long. The night dragged on, but for Lee Jin-woo, time had stopped. Each frame on the monitor screen was a blow, a brutal revelation that dismantled the facade of his perfect life. He wasn't just watching recordings, he was witnessing the disintegration of his certainties. The ice in his heart wasn't just cracking, it was melting under the scorching heat of guilt and shame. He fast-forwarded the recording to the next day, and then the next. The pattern was undeniable, painfully repetitive. Seo Yon, his wife, the woman he had chosen, revealed herself to be a cold shadow in his son's life. On a sunny afternoon, Ji-hoon was in the mansion's library, absorbed in a fairy tale book. His small fingers traced the colorful illustrations, a rare moment of peace in his solitary world. Seo Yon entered, her heels echoing in the silence. She didn't approach to see what he was reading. Instead, her eyes fixed on a small fruit juice stain on the book's cover. Ji-hoon, what is this? Can't you even be careful with a book? Your father hates dirty things. Her voice was a glacial whisper, but carried a reprimand that made the boy shrink his shoulders. She took the book from his hand, wiping the stain with a tissue with an expression of repulsion. Perhaps it's better if you don't touch the library books. Go to your room. I don't want you to ruin anything else. Ji-hoon lowered his head, his eyes welling up. He didn't protest, just stood up slowly. The joy of his reading moment completely crushed. It was then that Minji appeared, coming from the hallway. She had witnessed the scene. Her eyes, always so expressive, conveyed a silent sadness. Mrs. Park, excuse me. Ji-hoon was just exploring the books. It's natural for children to make small messes. I can clean the book and teach him to be more careful. Seo Yon turned, her irritation barely disguised. It's not your job to teach my son, Nanny Kim. He needs to learn to be more responsible. Minji remained calm, her voice soft but firm. With all due respect, ma'am, curiosity is a sign of intelligence, and a stained book is a small price to pay for a child's imagination. I'll take care of everything. She approached Ji-hoon, who was about to leave. Ji-hoon, how about we read this book together after I clean it? There's a very brave dragon in this story. Ji-hoon's face lit up slightly. He looked at Minji with renewed hope, a small nod. Seo Yon scoffed again, Realizing her authority had been subtly undermined, she turned her back and left, leaving Minji and Ji-hoon behind. Minji knelt, picked up the book and, with a gentle smile, began to talk to Ji-hoon about the dragon's story. Jin-woo felt a lump in his throat. He had bought that library for Ji-hoon, hoping it would be a refuge, a place of discovery. But Seo-yeon turned it into another minefield of rules and criticism. And Minji, the humble nanny, was there, restoring the magic, defending innocence. Hours passed, and Jin-woo didn't blink. He saw Seo-yeon ignore Ji-hoon when he tried to show a drawing. He saw her scold him for eating slowly, for making noise, for simply being a child. And in each of these interactions, Minji was there. Not with open confrontations, but with an emotional intelligence and a silent courage that left him astonished. She diverted Seo-yeon's attention, intervened with a plausible excuse, or simply offered Ji-hoon the comfort and validation his stepmother denied. In a particularly shocking scene, Seo-yeon was on the phone, talking loudly about a social event. Ji-hoon, who was playing with his toy cars on the living room floor, accidentally knocked over a small table sculpture. It didn't break, but it made a noise. Seo-yeon abruptly hung up the phone, her eyes flashing with anger. "Ji-hoon, you're unbelievable. Can't you be careful with anything? You're going to break everything in this house." She approached, her hand raised, not to hit, but with an implicit threat that made little Ji-hoon recoil, his eyes wide with terror. Before her hand could descend, or even before she could utter more cruel words, Minji appeared like lightning. She placed herself between Seo-yeon and Ji-hoon, not physically blocking, but with her calm and determined presence. "Mrs. Park, please. It was an accident. Ji-hoon was just playing. I can fix the sculpture and make sure he doesn't go near it again." Seo-yeon stopped, her hand still suspended. The surprise on her face was evident, mixed with anger. Minji didn't avert her gaze. Her eyes, though respectful, were an unbreakable wall of protection. The tension was palpable. Seo-yeon, visibly annoyed at being interrupted and challenged, even subtly, lowered her hand and turned away with a huff. "Do whatever you want, Nanny Kim. Just make sure he doesn't cause any more trouble." Minji waited for Seo-yeon to leave and then knelt beside Ji-hoon, who was trembling. She didn't say a word, just hugged him gently, allowing the boy to nestle in her arms. Jin-woo saw his son's small body relax, the fear slowly dissipating in the comfort of that embrace. Minji stroked his hair, whispering inaudible words, but which, by Ji-hoon's reaction, were of solace and security. Jin-woo felt a sharp pain in his chest, a pain that was not physical, but that hit him more deeply than any injury. He, the father, the protector, was absent. He had entrusted his son to the wrong woman and distrusted the right woman. The poor nanny, whom he had judged with such contempt, was the only person who was truly caring for his son, defending him from his own stepmother, from his own home, from his own family. The ice in his heart had not just cracked. It had completely shattered, revealing an open wound of guilt and regret. The image of Minji hugging Ji-hoon, offering him the warmth and security that he, the father, should have offered, was a cruel mirror of his own failure. He had been blind, arrogant, and now the truth hit him with the force of a tsunami. The initial distrust of Minji had turned into an overwhelming respect, a silent admiration for her strength and compassion. And somehow, amidst the ruin of his certainties, a seed of something new began to sprout. Something he couldn't name, but that pulled him out of the darkness. He turned off the monitor, the dark screen reflecting his pale face and troubled eyes. The night was still long, but the darkness within him was even greater. He needed to act. But how? And what did this overwhelming truth mean for the future of his son, of his marriage, and of his own soul? The answer would not come easy, but one thing was certain. Lee Jin-woo would never be the same again. The dark screen of the monitor was a cruel mirror. reflecting not only Lee Jinwoo's exhausted face, but also the ruin of his convictions. The silence in the security room was heavy, filled with the echoes of the voices he had just heard, of the images he couldn't erase from his mind. Minji's embrace of Ji-hoon, his son's small body relaxing in the security that he, the father, should have provided. That final scene was a dagger plunged into his chest, a wound bleeding guilt and regret. He stood up from the chair, his legs heavy, as if every fiber of his being was imbued with lead. He walked to the window, watching the city asleep below. The lights twinkled, indifferent to the storm brewing within him. He, the man who controlled empires, who moved mountains of money with a nod of his head, was powerless before the truth in his own home. The irony was brutal. The initial distrust of Min-ji, that humble nanny who seemed so out of place in his impeccable mansion, now seemed like a cruel joke. He had judged her by her appearance, by her social position, by the abysmal difference between their worlds. And yet, she was the only one who had seen his son's fragility, the only one who had reached out to protect him. She was the light he had tried to extinguish, the wall he had tried to tear down, and Seo-yeon, the woman he had chosen, the woman he had sworn to love. The image of her with her hand raised, the cold anger in her eyes as Ji-hoon cowered in terror, was an indelible stain on his memory. It wasn't just the cruelty, but the dissimulation, the perfect smile for him, the cutting coldness for his son. How could he have been so blind, so absorbed in his business, in his own image of success, that he failed to see his own son's suffering? A wave of nausea hit him. He was not just an absent father, he was an accomplice father. His neglect had allowed Ji-hoon to live under the shadow of fear, under the coldness of his stepmother. He had built golden walls around his son, but these walls did not protect him from the most intimate and insidious danger. Jin-woo closed his eyes, trying to organize the chaos in his mind. Questions tumbled over each other. What to do now? Confront Seo-yeon? Expose the truth? And Ji-hoon? How would he explain all this to his son, who had already been through so much? Divorce was a possibility he had never seriously considered, not because he loved Seo-yeon deeply, but for convenience, to maintain the image, to avoid scandal. But now, the image, the scandal, everything seemed insignificant compared to Ji-hoon's safety and happiness. He needed a plan. He couldn't act impulsively. The exposure of the cameras, the revelation of his surveillance, could further complicate the situation. Seo-yeon was cunning, and he knew she would try to manipulate the narrative, turn the situation against Min-ji, against himself. He needed irrefutable proof, a strategy that would guarantee Ji-hoon's safety and justice for Min-ji. The night dragged on, but Jin-woo felt no sleepiness. He returned to the chair, not to watch more recordings, but to think, to strategize. He picked up his phone, hesitated, and then dialed his private lawyer, Dr. Kim. It was late, but this was the kind of emergency that couldn't wait. Dr. Kim's sleepy voice answered, "Dr. Kim, I apologize for the hour. I need your advice on an extremely delicate matter. It's about Ji-hoon and my marriage." Jin-woo kept his voice controlled, though his insides were on fire. He couldn't reveal everything over the phone, but he needed to plant the seed. "I need you to prepare some documents, a custody agreement, and an action plan for a possible separation. And please keep this in absolute secrecy. No one, not even my wife, can know." On the other end of the line, Dr. Kim, a man accustomed to the eccentricities of his millionaire clients, but who rarely heard Jin-woo with such urgency in his voice, promised discretion and scheduled a meeting for the next morning behind closed doors. Jin-woo hung up, feeling a tiny weight lifted from his shoulders, replaced by an even greater weight of responsibility. He was beginning to move the pieces, but the game was dangerous. He thought of Min-ji, of her silent courage, her unwavering dignity. He had humiliated her in his mind, had distrusted her. And she, unknowingly, had been his son's guardian. He felt a pang of shame. How could he compensate her? How could he express the gratitude he now felt? The truth was that Minji was not just a nanny. She was the moral compass he had lost. She was the embodiment of kindness and strength he had forgotten existed, and somehow she had ignited a spark in his icy heart, a spark he didn't know he still possessed. Morning arrived, bringing with it the cold light of a new day. Jinwoo had not slept. His eyes were red, but his mind was strangely clear. He had made a decision. It wouldn't be easy, but he would do whatever it took to protect Ji-hoon and to right his own wrongs. As he went down for breakfast, the atmosphere in the mansion seemed the same as always. Seo-yeon, impeccable, was already at the table, flipping through a financial newspaper. Ji-hoon was sitting in his place, eating slowly, his eyes fixed on his plate. And Minji, discreet as ever, was in the kitchen, preparing the boys' snack. Jinwoo sat down, and Seo-yeon looked up, a superficial smile on her lips. "Good morning, dear. You seem to have had a difficult night, a lot of business." Jinwoo looked at her and for the first time saw through the facade. The smile didn't reach her eyes. The concern was a sham. He felt a chill. "Yes, a lot of business," he replied, his voice neutral. But inside, a war was about to begin. He looked at Ji-hoon, who briefly looked up, a flicker of hope mixed with his usual caution. Jinwoo gave him a small smile, a smile he hoped was of encouragement, of silent promise. Ji-hoon, to his surprise, returned it with an almost imperceptible nod. Minji came out of the kitchen with a glass of milk for Ji-hoon. Her eyes met Jinwoo's for an instant. There was no accusation, just the usual serenity and a touch of tiredness. He felt an urge to speak, to thank her right there, but he restrained himself. The time for that would come. For now, he needed to be the strategist, the protective father, the man who finally saw the truth. That breakfast was a stage. Seo-yeon, the lead actress with her rehearsed smile and soft voice that didn't reach her eyes. Ji-hoon, the silent supporting actor, a shadow of himself, eating without appetite. And Minji, the discreet extra, but who, for me, was the true star, the only one with a genuine light. I, Lee Jin-woo, the director of this macabre play, felt the weight of every unspoken word, of every furtive glance. "You seem thoughtful, dear," Seo-yeon commented, putting down the newspaper. Her voice was a balm, but I now heard the false melody behind it. "Are things so complicated with business?" I looked up, meeting her gaze. The sparkle was calculated, the interest superficial. "There are always challenges," I replied, my voice as controlled as hers. The lie was a shield I needed to maintain for now. Every fiber of my being screamed to unmask her right there, to tear off that mask of perfection and expose the cruelty I had witnessed. But impulsiveness was not an option. Ji-hoon was at the table. Minji was in the kitchen. I needed a strategy, not a spectacle. I observed Ji-hoon. He flinched slightly when Seo-yeon spoke, an almost imperceptible gesture, but one that now, for me, was a silent scream. My son lived under constant threat, and I had been too blind to see. Guilt gnawed at me, an acid that burned more than any business failure. Minji came out of the kitchen, placing a plate of fresh fruit on the table. Our eyes met for an instant. In that look, there was no judgment, only her usual dignity, and a quietness I now interpreted as resilience. I wanted to speak, to apologize, to thank her. But all I could do was an almost imperceptible nod, a silent promise that things would change. She just averted her gaze, returning to her tasks, oblivious to the storm I was about to unleash. After breakfast, the day began with the same false routine. Seo-yeon left for her social engagements with a superficial kiss on my cheek and a brief instruction to Minji about Ji-hoon's schedule. I watched her leave, the image of her with her hand raised still etched in my mind. The woman I had married was a stranger, a disguised predator, My meeting with Dr. Kim was scheduled for mid-morning. I drove to his office, my mind buzzing. Dr. Kim was a shrewd man with decades of experience dealing with the secrets and scandals of Seoul's elite. He received me in his discreet office with his usual formality. "Jin-woo, it's unusual for you to seek me out with such urgency," he began, adjusting his glasses. "Dr. Kim, the matter is extremely delicate and requires absolute secrecy," I said, my voice grave. "It's not just about a divorce, but about the safety and well-being of my son, Ji-hoon." I began to explain the situation, omitting the more graphic details, but emphasizing Seo-yeon's cruelty towards Ji-hoon and the urgent need to protect him. I mentioned that I had irrefutable proof of her behavior, without specifying the nature of the evidence. Dr. Kim listened attentively, his expression impassive, but I could feel the gravity of the situation settling in the room. "I understand," he said finally after a long silence. "This is very serious, Jin-woo. The custody issue will be paramount. Given your position and your wife's, the battle can be public and quite unpleasant. We need to build a solid case with evidence that cannot be contested." "I have the evidence," I stated, "and I want to ensure that Ji-hoon is protected above all else. I want full custody, and I want the nanny, Min-ji, to be protected too. She was the only one who defended my son." Dr. Kim raised an eyebrow. "The nanny? That could complicate things, Jin-woo. Your wife's defense may try to tarnish her reputation or even insinuate something inappropriate to discredit her." "She's innocent. She's the only decent person in this house besides my son," I retorted, anger bubbling beneath my controlled voice. "I hired her, I misjudged her, and she proved herself more worthy than any of us. I will not allow her to be dragged into this mess." The lawyer nodded, understanding the depth of my conviction. "Very well. We need a damage control strategy for her too. I will start preparing the divorce and custody documents. But Jin-woo, we need more than just your proof. We need a pattern of behavior, perhaps testimonies, and a plan to present this in a way that doesn't harm Ji-hoon further." "Understood. I will do whatever it takes to gather more evidence, and discretion is key. No one can know about this, not even Seo-yeon, until the right moment." Dr. Kim assured me of his loyalty and discretion. I left his office with a plan in hand, but with a heavy heart. The war had been declared, but the first battle would be fought in the shadows. Back at the mansion, everything seemed normal. Ji-hoon was in his room, playing quietly, and Min-ji was tidying the living room. I watched her for a moment, the way she moved with a simple grace, the attention she gave to every detail. She wasn't just an employee, she was Ji-hoon's anchor, the moral compass I had lost. Later, I found Ji-hoon drawing at the living room table, Min-ji sitting at a respectful distance, reading a book. I approached, something I rarely did during the day. "What are you drawing, Ji-hoon?" I asked, my voice softer than usual. He looked up, surprised, and showed me the drawing. It was a field of flowers, with a small figure holding hands with a larger figure. "It's me and Min-ji at the park," he whispered, pointing to the figures. My heart tightened. He had drawn Min-ji as his protector, his companion. I, the father, was absent from that fantasy world. I knelt beside him, something I also rarely did. "It's beautiful, Ji-hoon. Min-ji is very good to you, isn't she?" He nodded shyly. Min-ji, who had overheard the conversation, looked at me, a slight surprise in her eyes. I gave her a small, almost imperceptible smile of gratitude. It was a start, a small step towards rebuilding what I had broken. That night, Seo-yeon returned home, exhausted, but with the same impeccable smile. She told me about her day, about the people she met, the compliments she received. I listened to her, nodding occasionally, but my mind was elsewhere. I was observing her, every gesture, every word, looking for cracks in her facade. She asked about Ji-hoon, and I replied that he was fine, sleeping. She didn't ask anything else. There was no genuine concern in her voice, just an empty formality. The woman I had loved was an illusion, and the reality was a nightmare I was determined to end. The battle was just beginning, and I was ready to fight for my son, and for Minji, the woman who unknowingly had shown me the way back to the light. The night brought with it a deceptive quietness, while Seo-yeon slept in the next room. Oblivious to the storm brewing, I remained awake, reviewing every detail of my conversation with Dr. Kim. The strategy was laid out, but the execution was a minefield. Every step needed to be calculated, every word weighed. I couldn't make any more mistakes. Ji-hoon depended on me, and Minji, whom I had judged so harshly, deserved my protection. The morning sun streamed into the room, but brought no warmth. The mansion, once a refuge of luxury and convenience, now seemed like a gilded cage, with invisible bars that imprisoned my son and the only person who defended him. I went down for breakfast, the mask of indifference firmly in place. Seo-yeon, as always, was impeccable, reading her financial newspaper. Her eyes, once a mirror of my own blindness, now revealed a calculated coldness, an emptiness I had never perceived. "Good morning, dear. Did you sleep well?" she asked, her tone soft, but without the slightest genuine concern. "Like a log," I lied, my voice as neutral as hers. I watched Ji-hoon. He was more withdrawn than usual, his shoulders hunched, his eyes fixed on his plate. Minji brought him his glass of milk, and for a brief instant, their eyes met. In that silent moment, I saw the connection, the trust my son placed in her. And I saw Minji's unwavering dignity, even under the weight of a situation she didn't fully comprehend. I needed more than the camera footage. Dr. Kim had been clear, a pattern of behavior, testimonies, something that couldn't be contested. The cameras were a start, but Seo-yeon was cunning. She wouldn't act openly in my presence. I needed eyes and ears where she felt most secure to be who she truly was. After breakfast, while Seo-yeon prepared for her engagements, I made a discreet call. Not to my usual security team, but to a trusted contact who dealt with cutting-edge surveillance technology. "I need something undetectable," I instructed, my voice low. "Audio and video devices, discreet, with cloud recording and remote access. In several points of the house, especially in common areas and Ji-hoon's room." It was a drastic step, an invasion of privacy that churned my stomach, but Ji-hoon's safety was paramount. I was willing to get my hands dirty to protect him. Later, I found Ji-hoon in the garden, Minji watching him as he tried to stack blocks. The scene was so simple, so pure, that it hit me like a punch. My son, who should have been surrounded by love and security, found his refuge in the care of a stranger I had hired. "Ji-hoon, can I play with you?" I asked, kneeling down. He looked at me, surprised, then at Minji, as if asking for permission. Minji just nodded with a small smile. I spent the next few minutes trying to build a block tower with him. My hands, accustomed to manipulating billions, trembled slightly as I tried to fit the small plastic pieces. Ji-hoon laughed when the tower collapsed. It was a sound I realized I hadn't heard in a long time. A genuine laugh. Minji watched from afar, but I could feel her gaze. There was no longer the coldness I had projected onto her, just a calm observation. I turned to her. "Minji, thank you for taking such good care of Ji-hoon," I said, my voice a little hoarse. It was the first time I had expressed direct gratitude. She bowed slightly. "It's my job, Mr. Lee." But there was a warmth in her eyes that wasn't there before, a silent acknowledgement. That day, I began to document everything, a secret diary on my tablet, protected by complex passwords, every interaction of Seo-yeon with Ji-hoon, every harsh word, every look of contempt that I now perceived. I noted Ji-hoon's reactions, the moments when Minji subtly intervened. I was building my case, brick by brick, with the precision of a surgeon, Seo Yon, in turn, began to notice the change in me. My quietness, my observation. "You're different, Jinwoo," she commented during dinner, her eyes narrowed. "More introspective. Any problems with the company?" "Just the weight of responsibilities," I replied, keeping my gaze steady. "And you? Are your social engagements keeping you busy?" The question was innocuous, but I observed her, looking for any sign of nervousness, any crack. She smiled, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Always, Seoul's social world never stops. The tension hung in the air, invisible to her, but suffocating for me. I was playing a dangerous game, a game where the prize was my son's life and happiness, and I was ready to win, no matter the cost. With each passing day, my determination strengthened. The shadows I had ignored for so long were now in the light, and I was ready to face them. The war was unfolding, and I was the general, the judge, and the executioner. And my son, Ji-hoon, would be the only victor. Night came, and with it, the installation of the new devices. Under the pretext of a security update, trusted technicians, supervised by my contact, worked discreetly. Every corner of the house, every room where Seo Yon could interact with Ji-hoon, was now under my surveillance. I felt like a spy in my own home, but the sense of control, of finally having the tools to protect my son, was a dark relief. I lay in bed, the tablet in my hands, accessing the live feed. It was a strange feeling, seeing my own house through hidden lenses. But the image of Ji-hoon sleeping peacefully in his room, with Minji checking on him before retiring, gave me momentary peace. I was ready. The hunt had begun. The tablet screen glowed in the dark of my room, a portal to the truth I had avoided for so long. Seeing Ji-hoon sleeping, so small and vulnerable, and Minji, with her protective quietness, made me feel a mixture of relief and guilt. Relief for finally having acted, guilt for having taken so long. The hunt had begun, and I was the predator, but also the prey, trapped in the web of lies I myself had helped weave. The first morning with the cameras active was a test of patience. Seo Yon came down for breakfast, the usual smile on her face, the image of the perfect wife and mother. She asked Ji-hoon about his sleep, touched his hair distractedly, but my eyes, now trained by distrust, perceived the lack of warmth in her gestures. It was a performance, rehearsed and impeccable, for public consumption, or in this case, for my consumption. While she flipped through her newspaper, Minji helped Ji-hoon eat his porridge. Her patience, the way she wiped the corner of his mouth with her thumb, the way their eyes met in a silent understanding, all of this was a stark contrast to Seo Yon's polished indifference. I watched, recording every detail in my digital diary. These were not acts of overt cruelty, but rather of emotional neglect, of an absence that was as painful as any physical aggression. Later, while I was in my office, reviewing company reports, a motion notification from one of the internal cameras caught my attention. It was the living room. Seo Yon was there, on the phone, and Ji-hoon was trying to show her a drawing he had made. "Mommy, look!" Ji-hoon's voice was a hopeful whisper. Seo Yon, without taking the phone from her ear, waved her hand, a dismissive gesture. "Not now, Ji-hoon. Mommy's busy. Go play." Ji-hoon stood still for a moment, the drawing in his small hands, his shoulders hunched. The hope in his eyes faded, replaced by a familiar sadness. He turned and walked slowly to his room, the drawing still in his hands. Minji, who was organizing books on the shelf, watched the scene in silence, her face impassive, but I could feel the tension in her shoulders. She waited a moment, then followed Ji-hoon discreetly. I felt a pang in my chest. How many times had I done the same? How many times had I prioritized my work, my meetings, my own blindness, instead of paying attention to my son? The anger I felt for Seo Yon was a mirror of my own failure. In the afternoon, the surveillance revealed more. Seo Yon was in the kitchen talking to the housekeeper about the dinner menu. Jihoon entered looking for a toy. He stumbled slightly, and a small decorative flower vase on the counter wobbled. Seo-yeon turned sharply, her eyes narrowed. "Jihoon, be careful! You almost broke that. You're so clumsy." Her voice was sharp, full of irritation, a tone I had never heard directed at him. Jihoon flinched, his eyes wide. He didn't cry, but the expression on his face was one of pure terror. Minji, who was nearby, knelt beside him. "It's okay, Jihoon. It was nothing," she said softly, placing her hand on his back. She looked at Seo-yeon, a glint of defiance in her eyes, but her voice remained calm. "Ma'am, perhaps the vase should be placed in a safer spot. Jihoon is just a child." Seo-yeon shot a glacial look at Minji. "I don't need your suggestions, Minji. Just do your job." Minji didn't respond, just stood up and led Jihoon out of the kitchen, her steps firm. I watched it all, anger boiling inside me. The way Seo-yeon reprimanded Jihoon, the unnecessary cruelty, and the way Minji defended him, even subtly, risking her employer's wrath. That night, I couldn't sleep. The image of Jihoon's frightened face and Minji's defiant gaze replayed in my mind. I reviewed the recordings, cutting the most incriminating moments. It wasn't just the physical aggressions that the first cameras had captured. It was the pattern of emotional abuse, the neglect, the calculated coldness that Seo-yeon displayed when she thought no one was looking. I sent an encrypted email to Dr. Kim, attaching the first cuts. "Dr. Kim, I have more. Much more. We need to meet tomorrow morning. This is just the beginning." The response came almost immediately. "Understood. My office, 8 a.m. Get ready, Jinwoo. The storm is coming." I knew it was. But this time, I wouldn't be caught off guard. I had the evidence, I had the truth, and I had an unshakable motive. Jihoon deserved more than the life I had built for him. And Minji, the woman I had judged so harshly, deserved to be protected. The battle was intensifying, and I was ready to fight every inch of the way. With each passing moment, my determination solidified. I was no longer the blind, passive man. I was the father, the protector, and I was ready to dismantle Seo-yeon's empire of lies, brick by brick, until my son was safe. The tablet screen went dark, but the image of Dr. Kim's message remained etched in my mind. "The storm is coming." Yes, I knew. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel overwhelmed, but rather prepared. Guilt still gnawed at me, a slow poison I had allowed to spread for years, but now it was a catalyst, not a paralyzer. I was awake, my eyes open to the truth I had refused to see. The next morning arrived with a dense fog over Seoul, mirroring the heavy atmosphere within my own home. In Dr. Kim's office, the air was charged with formality and gravity. He awaited me, his face serious but with a glint of determination I recognized in myself. "Jinwoo," he began without preamble, "I reviewed the cuts you sent. It's disturbing. The emotional neglect is clear, and the way she reprimands Jihoon is unacceptable. But we need more. Something that shows a direct action, an aggression that cannot be minimized as discipline or stress." I nodded, my stomach tight. "I understand. The cameras are active. I'm monitoring everything." "Good. Continue documenting every incident, no matter how small it seems. We need to build an irrefutable pattern of harmful behavior, and the nanny, Minji, right? She can be a crucial witness, the way she intervened. It's remarkable." The mention of Minji made me pause. I had judged that woman so harshly, projecting onto her the coldness I feared in myself. But she was the opposite. Her quietness was not indifference, but a silent fortress, a shield for my son. "Yes, Minji," I confirmed, my voice a little softer than intended. "She is dedicated." Dr. Kim gave me a perceptive look. "Dedication is a rare thing, Jinwoo, especially when the person has nothing to gain but the satisfaction of protecting a child. Keep her safe. She's an important asset." I returned home with a new sense of urgency. Dr. Kim's words echoed, "We need more." I didn't want Ji-hoon to suffer anymore, but I knew that to free him, I would need irrefutable proof. With each passing minute, I felt more like a detective in my own life, searching the shadows for a truth that would liberate me. That afternoon, the tension in the house was almost palpable, though only I was aware of its origin. Seo-yeon seemed more impatient, her smile a little more forced. She watched me, her eyes narrowed, trying to decipher the change in me. "You're so distant, Jinwoo," she said during lunch, her voice honeyed, but with an edge of steel. "Is there something you're not telling me?" "Just the stress of business, Seo-yeon," I replied, keeping my gaze neutral. "You know how it is. Constant pressure." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Of course, but perhaps you should relax a little. Ji-hoon misses you." The manipulation was so subtle, so well rehearsed. She was trying to make me feel guilty, to divert me from my purpose. But I wouldn't fall into her trap. Later, in my office, the tablet glowed again. A notification, Ji-hoon's room camera. My heart raced. The scene unfolded. Ji-hoon was playing with his toy cars on the floor, absorbed in his own world. Minji was sitting in a nearby armchair reading a book, but her eyes were fixed on the boy, a discreet vigilance. Then the door opened and Seo-yeon entered. "Ji-hoon, what are you doing? It's not time to play with those noisy toys. You should be studying." Her voice was a tone above normal, irritated. Ji-hoon looked up, startled. "But Mommy, I'm just playing." "Playing? You should be getting ready for your piano lessons. You're so irresponsible, always doing what you want." Seo-yeon approached, and I could see the anger in her eyes. She picked up one of Ji-hoon's toy cars and threw it back into the toy box with unnecessary force. "Now go to the table and get your piano book. I don't want to have to repeat myself." Ji-hoon flinched, his eyes welling up. He looked at Minji, a silent plea. Minji, who had been silent until then, closed her book with a soft click. "Ma'am," Minji's voice was calm but firm. "Ji-hoon just finished his reading session. He has a few minutes before piano class. A brief period of play can help him relax and concentrate better afterwards." Seo-yeon turned to Minji, her eyes flashing. "I didn't ask for your opinion, Minji. I am his mother, and I know what's best for my son. Your job is to take care of him, not to tell me how to raise him." "My job is to ensure Ji-hoon's well-being, ma'am," Minji replied, without averting her gaze. "And a child's well-being includes time to play and an environment where he feels safe to express himself." The tension in the room was suffocating. Seo-yeon took a step towards Minji, her face contorted with rage. "Are you challenging me? You're just an employee. Remember your place." Ji-hoon, seeing the escalation, began to whimper, clinging to Minji's leg. Minji placed her hand protectively on Ji-hoon's head, without taking her eyes off Seo-yeon. "I'm just defending Ji-hoon, ma'am. He did nothing wrong to deserve such a reprimand, and he's scared." Seo-yeon stopped, breathing heavily. The mention of Ji-hoon being scared, and perhaps the presence of the camera she didn't know existed, made her recoil slightly. She cast a final furious glance at Minji, then at Ji-hoon. "Do whatever you want, but if he doesn't play perfectly in piano class, it will be your fault, Minji." She spun on her heels and left, slamming the door. Minji knelt, hugging Ji-hoon. "It's okay, little one. It's okay," she whispered, stroking his back. Ji-hoon buried his face in her shoulder, sobbing softly. I watched it all, my body trembling with rage. It wasn't just Seo-yeon's cruelty, but Minji's silent courage. She had put herself in the line of fire, risking her job, her position, to protect my son. And I, the father, was watching from afar, through a screen. Shame hit me like lightning. The next morning arrived with a palpable urgency. The air in Dr. Kim's office was denser, charged with a calculated tension. He received me with a grave nod, his glasses perched on his nose as he reviewed the video I had sent. "Jin Woo," he said, looking up. "This is crucial. Minji's intervention, her refusal to back down, and Seo Yon's response. This establishes a pattern of abusive behavior and a clear threat to Ji-hoon's well-being. We have grounds for immediate legal action." My heart pounded. What does that mean? Can we get Ji-hoon out of there? Dr. Kim nodded slowly. It means we can request a temporary protective order for Ji-hoon, alleging risk of emotional and psychological harm. This would allow us to remove him from the house while the divorce and custody proceedings unfold. The recordings are strong evidence for this. And the divorce? With this evidence, we can argue for sole custody and a fault-based divorce, which would significantly affect the division of assets and Seo Yon's reputation. But she won't give up easily. She has power, influence, and expensive lawyers. It will be a public and brutal battle. The mention of brutality didn't scare me. The image of Ji-hoon frightened, clinging to Minji, was a shield against any fear. I'm ready for it, whatever it takes. We'll need Minji's cooperation, Dr. Kim continued, his voice softer. She's the most important eyewitness. Her courage is undeniable, but she will be a target. We have to protect her, offer her security, legal support, perhaps even a new job away from Seo Yon's influence. Guilt hit me again. I had underestimated her, treated her as a mere employee, and she was risking everything for my son. I'll do whatever it takes for her too. She deserves more than I can offer. Good. So here's the plan. Dr. Kim began, sliding a folder across the table. First, we'll prepare the petition for the protective order. We need a few more days of evidence, if possible, to solidify the case. In the meantime, you need to act normally at home. Don't give Seo Yon any reason to suspect, but be ready to act the moment the order is granted. I returned home with my head full of strategies and my soul full of cold resolve. Every glance at Seo Yon was an exercise in restraint. She watched me, her eyes like blades trying to pierce my facade. "You're strange, Jin Woo," she commented that night, while I pretended to work in my office, but was actually monitoring the cameras. "It seems like you're hiding something." I looked up, keeping my eyes neutral. "Just the weight of responsibilities, Seo Yon. Our stock market investments are volatile. You know how it is." She smiled, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Of course, but perhaps you should spend more time with Ji-hoon. He seems too attached to the nanny lately. It's not healthy for a child to get more affection from an employee than from his own mother." The poison in her words was almost palpable. She was trying to undermine Minji, to isolate Ji-hoon, but I wouldn't allow it. That night, I saw Minji sitting on Ji-hoon's bed, reading him a story. The soft light of the bedside lamp illuminated their faces. Ji-hoon was nestled against her, his eyes sleepy but fixed on her, the tenderness on her face, the patience in her voice. It was what Ji-hoon needed. It was what I should have given him. The anger towards Seo Yon mixed with a deep gratitude for Minji. I would not only protect her, but compensate her for every moment of courage. The storm was brewing, and I was in the center of it, no longer as a passive victim, but as the guardian of my son and the woman who protected him. I was ready for war. The night dragged on, each minute an eternity of waiting and planning. Dr. Kim's words echoed in my mind, a public and brutal battle. But the brutality was already happening within the walls of my own home against my son. The image of Ji-hoon cowering, seeking refuge in Minji, was a fire that burned away any lingering hesitation in me. I was no longer the cold, distant man who had delegated his son's upbringing. I was a father, finally awakened, and a guardian for the woman who had become Ji-hoon's shield. In the following days, the house became an emotional minefield. I moved with calculated caution, every word, every gesture, part of a performance for Seo-yeon. She, in turn, seemed to sniff out the change in the air, her narrowed eyes following me, searching for the crack in my armor. "You're more present, Jinwoo," she commented one morning as I drank coffee, pretending to read the newspaper. "It's good to see you taking more interest in the house." There was a sarcastic tone, an insinuation that my interest was belated and perhaps false. "I'm just trying to balance things," I replied without looking up. "Business demands a lot, but Ji-hoon is my priority." She laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Of course, but perhaps you should worry less about him and more about our family's image. People are starting to notice the way Minji spoils him." The poison was subtle, but lethal. She was planting the seed of doubt, trying to manipulate me into pushing Minji away. But I had already seen the truth. I saw it every night, through the cameras. Minji was the only one who offered Ji-hoon the affection and security he so desperately needed. I watched her patiently helping him with homework, reading stories before bed, or simply sitting beside him as he played. Her presence, an anchor of calm. The tension reached a new peak the following afternoon. I was in my office, my eyes fixed on the tablet, when the notification from Ji-hoon's room camera flashed. Seo-yeon entered the room, where Minji was helping Ji-hoon assemble a complex puzzle. Ji-hoon was laughing, something rare to see when Seo-yeon was around. "What's all this racket?" Seo-yeon asked, her voice cutting through the air like a knife. "Ji-hoon, shouldn't you be concentrating on something more productive? This puzzle is for little children." Minji looked up, her face calm. "Ma'am, Ji-hoon is developing his cognitive and problem-solving skills. It's an excellent activity." "Don't tell me what's excellent for my son, Minji," Seo-yeon retorted, taking a step forward. "He needs discipline, not games, and you're encouraging this laziness." She leaned over the table and with an abrupt movement swept the puzzle pieces to the floor. The pieces scattered, Ji-hoon's work undone in an instant. Ji-hoon let out a small cry of surprise and sadness, his eyes welling up. He looked at the scattered pieces, then at Seo-yeon, and finally at Minji with a look of despair. Minji immediately knelt, beginning to pick up the pieces, her voice soft but firm. "Ma'am, that wasn't necessary. Ji-hoon was having fun and learning." "I decide what's necessary here," Seo-yeon shouted, her voice rising. "And I decide that you're being a bad influence on him. You're making him weak, dependent." "Perhaps I should find someone who understands the importance of a rigorous education." The threat was clear. Minji stopped picking up the pieces, but didn't avert her gaze. "My goal is Ji-hoon's well-being, ma'am, and he needs an environment where he feels safe and valued, not constantly criticized and undermined." Seo-yeon took another step, her face inches from Minji's. "Are you challenging me again? You're just an employee. Remember your place." Ji-hoon, seeing the escalation, began to cry softly. Minji, without hesitation, pulled Ji-hoon into a tight hug, protecting him with her body. Her eyes, however, remained fixed on Seo-yeon, a silent determination shining in them. "I haven't forgotten, ma'am, but I also haven't forgotten my duty to Ji-hoon." Seo-yeon recoiled, anger boiling in her eyes. The image of Minji hugging Ji-hoon, openly defying her, seemed to leave her momentarily speechless. She cast a look of contempt at the two, then turned and left the room, slamming the door with a force that made the picture on the wall tremble. Minji remained kneeling, hugging Ji-hoon, whispering words of comfort as he sobbed on her shoulder. She began to pick up the puzzle pieces again, with Ji-hoon helping, slowly, his small fingers trembling. I watched it all, my body rigid with fury. Seo-yeon's gratuitous cruelty, the explicit threat of dismissal, and Minji's unwavering courage. She not only defended Ji-hoon, but put herself in a position of extreme vulnerability for him. She was risking everything. and I, the father. The man who should protect them was there, watching through a screen. Shame and anger mixed into an explosive cocktail. I saved the video, attaching it to the email for Dr. Kim. More evidence, Dr. Kim. A direct threat of dismissal and the intentional destruction of Ji-hoon's belongings. This is emotional abuse and an attempt to isolate him from Min-ji. Dr. Kim's response was immediate. This is perfect, Jin-woo. Threats of dismissal and the destruction of the child's property solidify the case for emotional abuse and control. We are ready. The petition for the protective order will be filed tomorrow morning. Be ready to act. The storm is about to break. I turned off the tablet, the dark screen reflecting my tense face. The storm was no longer a distant threat. It was upon us, and I was in the center of it. No longer as a passive observer, but as the catalyst. Min-ji had shown me the resilience of the human spirit, the strength of unconditional love. I would not fail them. The war was declared, and I was ready to fight for Ji-hoon and for Min-ji with all my might. Dawn would bring the beginning of the end, and I was ready to be the lightning that would strike the darkness. Dawn arrived, not with the promise of a new day, but with the threat of a storm. I rose before the sun, the weight of last night's decision crushing my chest. Every fiber of my being was tense, my body a taut bow ready to fire. I looked at the clock. 6:00 a.m. In a few hours, Seo-yeon's world would collapse, and with it, the facade of perfection we had built. I went down to the kitchen, the smell of fresh coffee and toast already in the air. Min-ji was there, preparing Ji-hoon's breakfast, her slender and dedicated figure. She seemed tired, but her movements were precise, full of a silent grace. Ji-hoon was sitting at the table, drawing in a notebook, a rare moment of peace that I knew Seo-yeon would soon disturb. I had watched her through the cameras the night before, picking up the puzzle pieces with Ji-hoon, her words soft, a balm for my son's wounded soul. She was the light in the darkness I had allowed to envelop our home. Seo-yeon came down shortly after, impeccably dressed, a forced smile on her lips. "Good morning, Jin-woo. It seems you finally decided to join us for breakfast." Her eyes, however, were cold, calculating. She was testing me, trying to decipher the change in me. "Yes," I replied, my voice controlled. "I have an important day ahead." It wasn't a lie. As we ate, the tension was almost palpable. Seo-yeon tried to provoke Min-ji with passive-aggressive comments about Ji-hoon's upbringing, but Min-ji only responded with unwavering calm, her eyes never leaving Ji-hoon for long. I, on the other hand, could barely swallow. Every bite was an effort, every second an eternity. I was waiting for the phone call, the confirmation that the petition had been filed. Suddenly my phone vibrated. It was Dr. Kim. I excused myself and went to my office, closing the door behind me. "Dr. Kim!" My voice was hoarse. "The petition has been filed, Jin-woo," he said, his voice calm and professional. "The provisional protective order has been granted. The bailiffs are on their way to your residence now. They should arrive in about 20 minutes. 20 minutes. Time seemed to stretch and contract at the same time. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the tremor in my hands. This was it, the moment of truth. I returned to the dining room, my face a mask of neutrality. Seo-yeon looked at me, curious. "Is everything all right, Jin-woo? You look pale." "Just a little stress," I said, sitting down again. "Business is demanding." I looked at Min-ji, who was helping Ji-hoon wipe his mouth. Our eyes met for a brief moment, and I tried to convey a message of security, that everything would be all right. She just tilted her head slightly, a silent understanding passing between us. Suddenly, the doorbell rang, a firm and insistent ring. Seo-yeon frowned. Who could that be at this hour? Min-ji got up to answer, but I stopped her with a gesture. "I'll get it," I said, standing up. It was my responsibility. I walked to the door, my heart beating like a war drum. I opened it to find two men in dark suits, with briefcases in their hands. Bailiffs. "Mr. Jinwoo Lee?" one of them asked. "Yes. We have a summons and a court order for Mrs. Seo-yeon Park." I nodded, stepping aside. "Please, come in." Seo-yeon, who had stood up and come to the hall, saw the men and her smile faltered. "What is this?" she asked, her voice tinged with confusion and irritation. "Who are you?" The older bailiff stepped forward, his voice formal. "Mrs. Seo-yeon Park, we are bailiffs. We have a provisional protective order issued by the Seoul Family Court on behalf of your stepson, Ji-hoon Lee, and Mrs. Min-ji Kang." He extended the documents. Seo-yeon's face paled. She took the papers, her eyes scanning the lines, shock and disbelief turning into fury. "What is this? A protective order? This is absurd. Jinwoo, what does this mean?" She turned to me, her eyes burning. I stared at her, the mask finally falling. "It means it's over, Seo-yeon. The abuse, the threats, the manipulation. I saw everything. The cameras saw everything." Seo-yeon let out a hysterical laugh, a laugh that contained no joy, but pure venom. "Cameras? You were spying on me. You actually believe the lies of this insignificant nanny." She pointed a trembling finger at Min-ji, who was standing near Ji-hoon, protecting him with her body, her eyes wide with fear and surprise. "Min-ji didn't lie," I said, my voice firm, every word heavy with meaning. "She protected Ji-hoon when you mistreated him. She loved him when you neglected him. The evidence is irrefutable." "Evidence? What evidence?" she screamed, tearing the papers in her hands. "This is a farce, a conspiracy. You're being deceived by this woman, Jinwoo. She wants your money, she wants your place." The bailiff intervened. "Ma'am, please remain calm. The order is clear. You must leave the residence immediately. Any attempt to contact the minor Ji-hoon Lee or Mrs. Min-ji Kang will result in arrest." Seo-yeon was in shock, her eyes fixed on me. You're kicking me out of my own house? Because of her? Because of a nanny?" "This is no longer your home, Seo-yeon," I said, my voice cold. "Not when you turned it into a place of fear for my son. You have 1 hour to collect your essential belongings. If you try to take anything that isn't yours, or refuse to leave, the officers will escort you." The fury in her eyes turned into a glacial hatred. She looked at Min-ji, then at Ji-hoon, who was clinging to Min-ji's leg, his eyes wide. "You'll regret this, Jinwoo. You and your dear nanny. I'm going to destroy both of you. I'm going to take everything you have." "You won't take anything, Seo-yeon," I replied, without flinching, "except the consequences of your own actions. From now on, Ji-hoon and Min-ji are under my protection, and I won't allow anyone to hurt them again." She let out a scream of rage and ran upstairs, the bailiffs following her closely. The sound of doors slamming and objects being thrown echoed through the house. I turned to Min-ji. She was pale, but her eyes, though still frightened, shone with a mixture of relief and gratitude. Ji-hoon was still clinging to her, his face hidden in her clothes. "Min-ji," I said, my voice softening. "It's all right. You're safe now." She looked up at me, a tear rolling down her face. "Mr. Jinwoo." "No, Min-ji," I interrupted her. "I should be thanking you. You were the only one there for him. For us." I knelt in front of Ji-hoon, who finally looked up. His eyes were red, but there was a spark of hope in them. I hugged him, a tight, sincere hug, the first in a long time. "Daddy's here now, son. Daddy will take care of you." The front door opened again, and Seo-yeon came downstairs, a travel bag in one hand, her purse in the other. Her face was contorted with hatred. She stopped in the middle of the hall, casting one last look at us. "This isn't over, Jinwoo. This is just the beginning." The bailiffs escorted her out, and the door closed behind her, a final and decisive sound. The silence that followed was deafening, but it was no longer a silence of tension, but of a strange and fragile peace, The storm had erupted, and now, in the aftermath, I could see the sky clearing. The war had truly begun, but for the first time, I felt we had a chance to win. I had Ji-hoon and I had Min-ji, and for them, I would fight to the end. The silence that followed the closing of the door after Seo-yeon's departure was heavy, almost palpable. It wasn't the oppressive silence from before, but a strange void, like the thin air after an explosion. I turned, and my eyes met Min-ji's. She was still pale, with Ji-hoon clinging to her leg, but there was something different in her gaze. A mixture of exhaustion, relief, and a silent strength I had never noticed before. Ji-hoon, my small and resilient son, lifted his head. His eyes, once filled with fear, now watched me with cautious curiosity. I knelt again, reaching out to him. "Ji-hoon-ah!" My voice came out a little hoarse. "It's all right now. Daddy's here." He let go of Minji's leg and ran into my arms, burying his face in my shoulder. I felt his small hands squeeze my shirt, and a shiver ran through my body. It was a real hug, without hesitation, without fear. It was what I had longed for so long. Min-ji watched the scene, a small, sad smile on her lips. "He needed that, Mr. Jinwoo," she whispered. Her voice soft as a balm. I looked up at her, still hugging Ji-hoon. "We needed it, Min-ji, all of us." The house, once a stage of tension and secrets, now seemed to breathe, but I knew this peace was fragile, a brief interlude before the next wave. Seo-yeon's words echoed in my mind. "This isn't over, Jinwoo. This is just the beginning." She was not a woman who would accept defeat easily. Her fury was a fire I knew she would try to consume everything in its path. I spent the rest of the morning with Ji-hoon, trying to rebuild the bridges I had let crumble. We played, read books, and for the first time in years, I felt truly present as a father. Min-ji was nearby, discreet, but her presence was a silent comfort. She prepared a light lunch, and Ji-hoon ate with an appetite I hadn't seen in a long time. With every laugh from Ji-hoon, with every grateful look from Min-ji, my determination solidified. I would not allow Seo-yeon to take this from us. In the early afternoon, my phone rang again. It was Dr. Kim. "Jinwoo, Mrs. Park has already contacted her lawyer," he informed, his voice serious. "As expected, she's furious. They're already preparing a counteraction, alleging defamation and parental alienation. She's also threatening to expose an inappropriate relationship between you and the nanny and use that to question your fitness as a father." My blood ran cold. I knew she would try something like this, but hearing the words out loud was different. "Inappropriate relationship?" I repeated, anger bubbling. "She's delusional. Min-ji is Ji-hoon's nanny, and the only thing she did was protect him. I know Jinwoo, but she'll try to paint a different picture for the media and the court. We need to be prepared. The custody battle will be brutal, and the divorce even more so. She'll try to take every penny she can and use Ji-hoon as a weapon." "Let her try," I said, my voice firm. "I have the recordings, I have the proof of the abuse, and I have Min-ji who will testify. She has nothing but lies." "That's good, Jinwoo, but public image is important. We need to control the narrative. I suggest you and Ms. Kang maintain a distance for a while, at least publicly, to avoid any fuel for her accusations, and prepare for a media storm. She won't hesitate to use the press." I hung up the phone, the weight of Dr. Kim's words hitting me. Public distance. How could I ask Min-ji to step away, even if it was just a facade, after everything she had done? And how could I protect Ji-hoon from the storm Seo-yeon was about to unleash? I found Min-ji in the kitchen washing dishes. She turned when she heard me enter. "Mr. Jinwoo, is everything all right?" she asked, noticing the tension on my face. "Seo-yeon is preparing to fight," I said without beating around the bush. "She'll try to destroy us. She'll try to use the media. She'll try to distort the truth about you, about us." Her eyes widened slightly, but she didn't waver. I understand, Mr. Jinwoo. I'm ready for whatever it takes to protect Ji-hoon. Her courage, her loyalty, were a beacon in the darkness. Min-ji, I began, hesitating. Dr. Kim suggested that. To avoid giving her any ammunition, that. Perhaps we should maintain a certain distance publicly, just for a while. She looked at me, and for a moment I saw a pang of hurt in her eyes, quickly replaced by understanding. I understand, she repeated, her voice a little softer. It's for Ji-hoon's sake. I'll do whatever it takes. I felt a pang of guilt. I was asking her to sacrifice even more, to endure the scrutiny and accusations silently. It's not fair to you, Min-ji, I said. She shook her head. It's not about fairness, Mr. Jinwoo. It's about what's right, and what's right is to protect Ji-hoon. I trust you. The following days were a whirlwind. Dr. Kim's suggestion to maintain distance, even if only publicly, created a subtle tension in the house. Min-ji continued to care for Ji-hoon with the same dedication, but there was a forced formality in our interactions. Our gazes met more frequently, laden with a tacit understanding, a shared pain. But words were few and measured. I found myself observing her, the way she moved, the quietness in her eyes, and felt a lump in my throat. It was torture to have to act as if she were just an employee when my heart cried out for something more, something I couldn't yet name. The media storm, as Dr. Kim predicted, was not long in coming. First, there were anonymous articles in gossip blogs, insinuating a family scandal involving the CEO of Lee Holdings and his nanny. Then, the more traditional media began to pick up the trail, distorting the facts, painting me as an unfaithful man and Min-ji as a gold digger. Photos of Seo-yeon, crying and visibly upset, appeared everywhere, accompanied by statements from her lawyers about parental alienation and defamation. The image of Seo-yeon, the betrayed wife and wronged mother, was being carefully constructed. Ji-hoon, fortunately, was largely oblivious to the external chaos. I kept him away from television and newspapers, and Min-ji was a fortress of calm for him. But I could feel the pressure. My business meetings became more tense. My business partners looked at me with a mixture of curiosity and judgment. The reputation I had built over years was being dismantled piece by piece. One evening, I found Min-ji sitting alone in the kitchen, looking at her phone screen. The blue light illuminated her face, and I realized she was reading one of the cruelest articles about her. Silent tears streamed down her face. My heart tightened. I knew she was bearing the weight of the accusations with a dignity I could barely comprehend. Min-ji, I said, my voice soft but firm. She looked up, startled, and quickly tried to wipe away her tears. Mr. Jinwoo, she murmured, her voice choked. I'm so sorry. Don't be, I said, approaching and taking the phone from her hand. The headline screamed about the seductive nanny. I turned it off. None of this is true, not a word of it, and I won't let them hurt you. She looked at me, her eyes red and swollen, but there was a spark of hope in them. But people will believe it, Mr. Jinwoo, my family. They'll see it. I will protect you, Min-ji. I will protect Ji-hoon, and I will protect the truth. I couldn't hug her, not there, not with Seo-yeon's shadow hanging over us, but my gaze tried to convey all my promise. She nodded, a single tear rolling down her face. The next day, I met with Dr. Kim again. We need to counterattack Jinwoo, he said, his voice grave. Seo-yeon is using the press to delegitimize us. It's time to release the recordings. Not all at once, but strategically. We'll show the world who she really is, and who Kim Min-ji really is. I nodded, the decision weighing on me, but knowing it was the only way. It was time to turn the tables. The war was no longer just in the courts, but in the arena of public opinion. And I was ready to fight for Min-ji and for Ji-hoon, no matter the cost. The decision to release the recordings was like pulling the pin from a grenade. I knew the explosion would be devastating, but it was the only way to clear the air, to expose the truth that Seo-yeon tried to bury under a mountain of lies. Dr. Kim was meticulous, choosing the most impactful excerpts. Seo-yeon's cold voice reprimanding Ji-hoon for a small mistake, the way she ignored him, the brutal scene where Min-ji intervened. It wasn't just a matter of proving the abuse, but of painting a clear picture of the toxic dynamic that had settled in my home and Min-ji's heroic intervention. The first video was anonymously released on an online news channel known for its investigative journalism. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. The initial shock gave way to outrage. Social media exploded. Seo-yeon's name, once associated with the image of a betrayed wife, was now synonymous with cruelty. Her photos, once full of calculated tears, now seemed a grotesque farce. I watched the storm brew from my office, my heart heavy, but with a sense of cold justice. Ji-hoon was playing with Min-ji in the garden, oblivious to the revolution happening outside. I watched them, and their image, so pure and innocent, reinforced my conviction. It was for them that I was fighting. Seo-yeon tried to counterattack, of course. Her lawyers issued furious statements, alleging video manipulation, defamation, and a conspiracy to discredit her. But it was too late. The public had already seen the truth. The images spoke louder than any legal statement. More recordings were released, including audios of Seo-yeon threatening Min-ji, and even excerpts of conversations where she expressed her contempt for Ji-hoon. With each new revelation, Seo-yeon's web of lies unraveled. The media, which once idolized her, now pursued her. Her sponsors began to terminate contracts. Her reputation, built on a facade of perfection, crumbled in real time. I felt no pleasure in her downfall, only a bitter relief. It was the price she paid for her cruelty. Min-ji, on the other hand, emerged as the central figure of a story of courage and sacrifice. The articles that once defamed her as a seductive nanny now praised her as the heroic nanny. People began to share their stories of empathy and admiration. Her family, which I later learned had been targeted by shame and gossip, now received messages of support and pride. One evening, Min-ji found me in the kitchen. She was no longer crying, but her eyes still carried the weight of the experience. "Mr. Jin-woo," she said, her voice stronger than I had heard it in weeks. "My mother called me. She said she's proud." A small smile appeared on her lips, a genuine smile that lit up her face. "I'm proud too, Min-ji," I replied, and the truth in my words was almost palpable. "You are the bravest person I know." The public distance that Dr. Kim had suggested now seemed a cruel joke, a remnant of a strategy that the truth had pulverized. There was no longer any need to hide anything. People knew who Min-ji was, and they knew what she had done. The divorce and custody proceedings became a formality. With the irrefutable evidence of Seo-yeon's abuse and neglect, she no longer had a leg to stand on. She lost custody of Ji-hoon, and the financial settlement was significantly less than she had demanded, reflecting her misconduct. The battle was won. Ji-hoon was safe. The days that followed were days of healing. Ji-hoon blossomed. His laughter filled the house, and his eyes, once cautious, now sparkled with uninhibited joy. He clung to me with the same ease with which he clung to Min-ji, and I realized that finally we were a family. Not the family I had planned, but a family built on truth, loyalty, and unconditional love. One afternoon, I found Min-ji sitting on the garden bench, watching Ji-hoon play. The setting sun painted the sky with shades of orange and pink, and the gentle breeze rustled her hair. I sat beside her. "Min-ji," I began, my voice a little hoarse. I need to thank you for everything, for protecting Ji-hoon, for opening my eyes, for your courage." She looked at me, and her eyes, once filled with hurt and forced understanding, were now filled with a soft light. "I just did what was right, Mr. Jinwoo." "No," I said, shaking my head. "You did much more than that. You showed me what it means to be a real father, what it means to truly love. I was blind, Minji, blinded by my own ambition, by my own pain. You brought me back." There was a silence, filled only by the sound of Ji-hoon's laughter. I reached out, hesitant, and touched her hand. Her skin was warm and soft. "I know I asked you to keep your distance," I continued, my voice almost a whisper, "and I'm so sorry for that. I was scared, but I'm not anymore. I don't want to keep my distance anymore, Minji." She squeezed my hand, and a shy but radiant smile bloomed on her face. "Me neither, Mr. Jinwoo." At that moment, under the calming sky, I knew the storm had passed. The war was won. And although the road ahead might have its own challenges, I was no longer alone. I had Minji, and I had Ji-hoon. I had a family, and for the first time in a long time, I had hope. Life wasn't a fairy tale, but it was real, and it was precious. And I was ready to live it, one day at a time, with the people I loved by my side.